What are the worst cars ever made? Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you. You see, cars can be bad for loads of reasons. You know, they can be ugly, they can be slow, or they can be unreliable. But there are plenty of cars out there that are so bad in so very many ways. Some had a huge design flaw, and some were actually worse than the cars they were supposed to replace. And others just made no sense whatsoever. So here's my pick of the top 10 worst cars ever made. I'm Matt Watson, and you're watching CarWow.
Buying a new car? Then head to CarWow and my team will help you find your next car at a fair price. CarWow, your one-stop car buying comparison site.
Let's kick off this list with the DMC DeLorean. It could have been a brilliant car. It was made out of stainless steel, just like Elon Musk's new Starship. And it starred in Back to the Future, which is one of the biggest movie franchises of all time. How's that for marketing? However, it had serious problems. One of them was the engine. Rather than a burly V8, the DeLorean had a V6 stolen from a Peugeot. So it only had 130 horsepower. This meant the DeLorean could only manage 109 miles an hour. That's rubbish for a car that looked like it'd be able to do at least 200. Even for 1981, when the car came out, 109 miles an hour was not quick. Build quality was another big issue. Some DeLoreans were so badly built that it took 200 extra hours to make them actually ready to sell. That's after they'd left the factory. They had to then work on them again. Bonkers. On the subject of factories, the DeLorean factory in Northern Ireland actually got repossessed by the British government after the company went bust in 1982. So good luck in getting spare parts. And if that wasn't bad enough, John DeLorean, who owned the DeLorean car company, was arrested by the FBI on suspicion of drug trafficking. This is the Isetta Bubble Car, and it's one of the weirdest cars ever made. It was first built by a company that made fridges, which explains why it has one big door on the front instead of one on each side. You know, like a normal car has. Now this probably felt space-age back in the 1950s, but it meant that you couldn't open the door if someone parked a bit too close to you. You'd have to climb in through the roof. It also meant there was absolutely no protection in the event of a crash. None, unless you count your ankles as crumple zones. However, it wasn't all bad. Some of these bubble cars could actually return nearly 90 miles per gallon, which is pretty incredible even for today, but they were unbelievably slow. Some would take half a minute to reach 30 miles an hour. Half a minute for 30, so 30 seconds for 30. Terrible. The fastest version was actually built by BMW, and it had a 300cc bike engine, and it would do 53 miles an hour. Now that must have been absolutely terrifying, bombing down the road at over 50 in what is essentially an egg. Back in the 80s, Pontiac wanted to build a light, mid-engined, two-seater sports car, and it came up with this, the Fiero. It was actually a lot like the original Toyota MR2, but it actually came out a year earlier, in 1983. Now, it all sounds good, doesn't it? So why is it on this list? Well, these cars used to catch fire a lot. By 1987, 260 Fieros, appropriate name obviously, had burnt to the ground because of problems with the piston connecting the rods. They'd fail and cause the engine to catch fire. So to try and sell more cars, Pontiac gave the Fiero a body kit. When I say body kit, they actually turned the Fiero into a fake Ferrari. They replaced all the body panels to new ones that made it look like a 308. I mean, look at it. I can't believe this was actually a factory option. I mean, how insane is that? Pontiac called this car the Mera, but less than 100 were sold before Pontiac, surprise, surprise, got sued by Ferrari and had to stop production. It's no surprise there, really, is it? What were they thinking? Convertibles are great, right? Nothing beats folding back the roof on a sunny day. That's why they're so popular here in Britain. They are actually. We are the biggest market in Europe for convertibles, yet our weather is rubbish. Anyhow, some convertibles completely missed the point, like the Citroen C3 Pluriel. It didn't come with a folding soft top or a metal hard top. For some reason, it had both. The middle of the roof was a big piece of fabric that you could fold back, a bit like a Fiat 500c. It's fine. And you could also remove the two metal rails on each side if you wanted to go completely topless. But these were really heavy, so you couldn't just pop them in the boot. Actually, they wouldn't fit. You'd actually have to leave them at home. And this meant you couldn't then put the roof up if it started to rain because the roof was in your garage. Whoever signed that off really didn't think things through, did they? The Trabant 601 was a car made in Germany, and German cars tend to be pretty good, right? Well, it was actually made in the old East Germany during the Cold War. So it was pretty much the cheapest, most basic car ever built. The Trabant didn't have a 4-stroke engine like most cars. Instead, it had a 2-stroke engine like a scooter. Did mean that it was easy to fix, but it also meant that it was really noisy, smelly and horrible. This thing pumped out loads of blue smoke, and the most powerful versions only had 26 horsepower, so they were really, really slow. But the worst thing about the Trabant was its bodywork. I'm not talking about the way it looked, although it was pretty ugly too. I mean the fact it was actually made out of recycled cotton. Not steel, not aluminium, cotton. The Trabant was basically made out of used underwear. Talk about skid marks. Now, one of the things about the Trabants were that they're really good at off-road because people just hooed them about and didn't care. And I actually took a bunch of beaten up old hatchbacks off-road ages ago, and we filmed it to see if you could go hardcore off-roading in a cheap hatchback as good as you could in a modern SUV. Now, if you're interested in watching that video, I'll put a link just up there. It should be popping out now. You can go watch that if you want. It's really quite interesting. This is the Amphicar, and as you've probably guessed, it's an amphibious car. It came out in the early 60s, which was when a lot of people were taking mind-expanding medication.
Back in the 60s, baby, yeah!
Its engine only made about 40 horsepower, so it was really slow on the road. And it wasn't very boat-shaped either, so it was really slow in the water too. It could only do 7 miles an hour, which meant that if you were in anywhere that had any form of current, you couldn't go forwards. And every time you got it wet, you had to grease all its joints to stop them seizing up or rusting. And some of them were really, really difficult to reach. So if you went in the water, you'd have to take the back seats out and give it all a jolly good greasing down afterwards. Amphibious cars, why do people keep trying to build them? Why not just buy a car and use it on the road, get a trailer to tow your boat and use the boat in the water? Get the right tool for the right job. Just saying. I bet you knew this car was coming, didn't you? Oh yeah, it's the Aston Martin Cygnet. And it's on my list because it should never have been made in the first place. You'd never have expected Aston Martin to make a city car, but back in 2011, it had to find a way to lower its average carbon dioxide emissions of all its cars to avoid paying hefty emissions fines. So instead of making a brand new car from scratch, what can we do? Toyota IQ, let's take one of those and just slap a bunch of Aston badges on it. Be fine. To be fair, the car did its job. It pumped out so little CO2 that they brought Aston's average emissions way, way down. But this didn't stop the Cygnet from being absolutely crap. You know, there wasn't anything wrong with the Toyota IQ underneath, but Aston's version was so much uglier. How did they manage that? I mean, just look at the Aston grille on the front, it just doesn't work. Also, it was way more expensive than the IQ. So this Cygnet cost more than £30,000, which is 3 times the price of the Toyota. Aston wanted to sell around 4,000 of them every year. But in the end, only 300 people decided to buy one. And no wonder, I mean, look at it. It's horrible. The next car on my list is the Ford Mustang. Now I'm just wincing because I can see all you American viewers just bashing on your keyboard going, Matt, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, this is a great car. Hear me out, okay? You see, it's not the new Mustang, that's a really, really good car, and it's not the classic one from the 60s either. Don't worry about that, I'm not completely stupid. It's the Mustang 2 from the 1970s. Now, one of the worst things about this car was the way it looked. It's like a fake copy of a real Mustang. I can't believe Ford actually built this. But the absolutely worst thing about it was its engine. Mustangs are supposed to have big V8s, right? Everyone knows that. But the Mustang 2 came out just as the US fuel crisis began. That was when petrol became really, really expensive. Sorry, gas became really, really expensive. So Ford had to fit a smaller, more efficient engine, kind of like what's happening nowadays. In fact, the Mustang 2 actually came with a 2.3 litre 4-cylinder engine, just like the current EcoBoost version you can now buy. But today's EcoBoost makes 291 horsepower, which is pretty alright, it's not bad. The old Mustang 2's engine made 90 horsepower, so not 290, 90. Ford eventually gave it a V8, which you think, oh, okay, that's alright. However, Despite having 4.9 litres, it could only muster 140 horsepower. That's less than you get from a modern 1.5 litre Ford Focus. Now, if you're thinking about buying a Ford Focus, or any new car for that matter, what I've done is put a little link up there in the pop-out banner. If you click on that, you can go to the CarWow website, where my team and I will help you choose the right car for you and get it for a fair price for one of our trusted dealers. Alternatively, just after this video, you can Google "Help Me CarWow" and we'll see what we can do. Now let's talk about something a little bit unusual. Canadian sports cars. That's right, the land of Mounties and maple syrup actually made a sports car once. Well, they tried to. Now it's this car here, the Bricklin SV-1. Looks pretty good. But unlike most sports cars, it was conceived with safety as a key priority. SV1 actually stands for Safety Vehicle 1. Trust the Canadians to make a sports car boring. I'm sorry to my friends at the Straight Pipes for saying that. Please forgive me, love you guys. Safety was the reason you could only get it in really bright colours, to make it easier to see at night. And it didn't even come with a cigarette lighter or an ashtray, as I guess smoking's too unhealthy. The SV1 came out during the fuel crisis, just like the Mustang 2. So its massive 5.9 litre V8 only made 220 horsepower. And this engine had to lug around a load of heavy steel impact bars, so the SV1 was very slow. Its top speed was only 118 miles an hour. Maybe SV1 should stand for Slow Vehicle 1. But one of the worst things about the car were its gull-wing doors. I mean, who thought you'd ever say the worst thing about a car was its gull-wing doors? They look cool, but the electronics that open them would break if it got too hot. So you get trapped inside the car and cook. We all know modern electric cars are pretty good, right? Teslas will embarrass supercars in drag races. And you can buy relatively affordable hatchbacks with hundreds of miles of electric range, like the Renault Zoe. But back in the early noughties, electric cars were crap. And the worst of the worst was the g-wiz. I'm slightly hesitant about putting it on my list, not because it was a good car, but because it wasn't really a car at all. It actually got sold as a quadricycle instead. Basically, because of its low weight, it was classed as a quad bike with a roof, so it didn't need to pass all those safety tests. Good thing it could only do 50 miles an hour then. Now, I actually went in one of these g-wizes and drove on for a few days, and it's incredibly cramped, incredibly slow, and not a pleasant experience. I remember thinking back then, there is no way electric cars are gonna take off if they're anything like this. How wrong was I? Now, if you'd like to keep up to date with all the latest car news and reviews in between these video uploads, click on the pop-out banner just up there, and that's a link which will take you through to our website, CarWow, where you can sign up to the CarWow newsletter. It's completely free. We'll send you updates to your email inbox on a weekly basis, and if you want to, you can unsubscribe at any time. Go check it out. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like. Please let me know in the comments below which you think are the 10 worst cars of all time. Now, once you've done that, if you click on that window there, you can watch a cool drag race. And if you click on that window down there, you can watch an even cooler drag race. And if you click on that box there, you can go to CarWow to see how much money you can save on a new car. Thanks for watching.